Hi there! In this newest episode of my prediction series, I will be discussing the April 19 primary happening on the Democratic side of the field with the two major candidates in contention, Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. And I'll be discussing who I think will win as my prediction and why I think they'll win. So to get started, I think that the winner of the New York State primary on April 19th will be Hillary Clinton. And I think that Bernie Sanders will be second. I think Clinton will win around 55% of the vote. I think it will be a pretty decisive victory. It may be somewhat close, maybe, but I think she's ultimately going to win in a decisive fashion, meaning that she'll still gain the majority of the vote up for grabs. And there's about 10 reasons I have for why this is. The first reason, for the better part of the last decade, from 2001 to 2009, Hillary Clinton was the junior senator from New York. She was a two-term senator, meaning that she got reelected with pretty good numbers. She won millions of votes in the election to re-elect her, and she won by a solid two-digit lead, by 11% of the vote against John Spencer for her re-election as an incumbent. So, in terms of the first reason why I think that she'll win the primary on April 19th, it has everything to do with the fact that in recent memory, in New York State, Hillary Clinton was one of two senators in the state, and she was the junior senator, meaning she had less time in office as compared to Chuck Schumer, but she is also reelected with pretty big numbers, pretty big support. And so in terms of the first reason I think she'll be the winner in the April 19th New York primary, it has everything to do with the fact that she was the two-term senator from the state of New York. She was reelected with big numbers, and she helped New York rebuild and recover from one of the most traumatic events in New York State history. And so I think that a lot of those voters who were there when they elected her the first time and second time around last decade will definitely pull through for her this decade. The second reason, the super delegates, the unpledged delegates in the state of New York, almost unanimously have indicated public support for Hillary Clinton. I mean, it's not even close. There's maybe 3 or 4 uncommitted superdelegates in terms of indicating public support within New York State. But of the 44 unpledged delegates within the state of New York, of major party leaders and people who are part of the DNC and various powerful and important people within the Democratic Party that qualify as superdelegates, she has overwhelming support of those superdelegates. I mean, it's incredible. And so that's the second reason I think that has a big advantage for her, is because a lot of those superdelegates are actually sitting elected officials. So the governor, both senators in the state of New York, a whole lot of people from the House of Representatives in the state of New York have all indicated support of Hillary Clinton. Now, New York State's a huge state. It's a pretty democratic state. It's got a lot of elected Democrats around the state. It's historically been a very democratic state over the years, especially when it comes to their senators and a lot of the members of the House of Representatives. So for my second point as to why I think Hillary Clinton will win the primary on April 19th, everything to do, on that second point anyways, with the superdelegate support, because it's huge. With a state as big as New York, with a diverse electorate, with millions of voters, it's one of the most populous states in the country, it really benefits a candidate to have as much support from elected officials within the state, because those elected officials have a lot of clout within the media of the state to get their voice heard and to get heard when they're speaking about their support of Hillary Clinton. So that's my second reason. The third reason, New York State's primary is a closed primary. So in the past, when Sanders has won, he's won in particular in open primaries and open caucuses. Washington State, Wisconsin, to some degree, some of the other states, like Michigan and other places where Sanders has won that were open primaries, open caucuses. It's been to his advantage because of independent voters. Now, because New York State's primary is a closed primary, those independents, meaning people not affiliated with the Democratic Party or registered as Democrats, don't get a vote in the New York State closed primary for the Democratic side of the field. This is a big deal for my third point as to why Hillary Clinton will be the winner, because when it's a closed primary of voters who are only Democrats, Sanders doesn't win as much as Hillary Clinton to the degree that he needs to, but just also to, winning as a candidate. He doesn't tend to win in those closed primaries. He lost in Ohio. Well, I mean, Ohio's kind of semi-open, but he lost in Arizona. He lost in Florida by a lot, very populous state. He lost in Louisiana. He lost in some of those closed caucuses like Nevada. Point being that when it is a closed primary and it's only voters of the Democratic Party, or rather voters who are affiliated with the Democratic Party, Sanders is at a disadvantage, especially in populous states, states with a lot of people. And even in open primaries in states with a lot of people, like Texas, because when there's a lot of people and a lot of turnout in a diverse electorate, Sanders doesn't do as well. He just doesn't. And so, and part of the reason has to do with being able to spend the money with as much frequency and having the campaign infrastructure around the state to compete with Hillary Clinton's machine. And she's done a good job in some of those really big states. So for the third point as to why I think Sanders will lose in New York State and Clinton will win is because it is a closed primary. So I think that she will win the majority of Democratic voters within the New York State primary. Now the fourth reason is that Hillary Clinton's campaign is headquartered in New York State. From the beginning of this campaign season, I mean, pretty much from the get-go, the campaign has been able to campaign to talk about Hillary Clinton and to, make an impact and discuss with the media and everyone else Hillary Clinton as a candidate. And since the campaign's headquartered in New York City, that's a big deal. That sends a big message in terms of where they think one of the most important primaries is during this entire election season, that they would put their headquarters for the entire campaign, this nationwide campaign in New York State, New York City. So that's my fourth reason. My fifth reason is that in this campaign season, it hasn't factored as much, but it certainly is a big deal, is that the Clinton Foundation is headquartered in New York State and the city, and it has done a lot of humanitarian work around the world. And so when the Clinton Foundation has done a lot of work and is a known entity around New York State for as long as it's been, for the better part of almost 2 decades now, that's a big deal, right? That's Clinton through the foundation and through the work that they do, has been able to have sort of that constant media presence and discussion of what the foundation does around the world, and that has an impact, right? Sanders doesn't live in New York. He hasn't spent a lot of time campaigning in New York to the degree that Clinton has. So that was my fifth reason. So now my sixth reason is that Hillary Clinton lives in New York. That's where she's made her home. And when a candidate lives in a place, Vermont for Sanders, Trump, Florida, and also lives in New York part of the year, it has an impact. Not a huge impact necessarily, but it has an impact. And in this case, I think that the impact is that Hillary Clinton, being a famous sort of public person for the better part of the last 30 years, 40 years, and spending a good portion of that living in New York State, has been able to get the same level of, being a known entity around New York. Certainly nowhere near the degree of Trump, because he's been in New York for a long time, but definitely a very known figure in the New York culture and media markets. And so that's to her advantage, for my sixth point, that she lives there, because Sanders doesn't, and that will have an impact. I think that will definitely tip the scales in her favor. All right. The seventh reason I think that Hillary Clinton will win in New York as compared to Sanders has to do with what's been going on with how Sanders has been talking about Wall Street and has been talking about the economy and some of his message in that regard. I don't think that will play as well in New York as it will in some of the other states around the country, because Wall Street's located in New York, right? A lot of Clinton's support, a lot of her funding comes straight out of New York. And when people are funding a campaign, when they're spending money to contribute to a campaign, and they're participating in a campaign as volunteers or working at the headquarters as workers for a campaign, it makes a difference. And so for this seventh point, I think that the fact that Wall Street's headquartered in New York City within the state, and that so much of the economic engine, especially of the financial industry, happens within the state of New York, that's going to make a difference, because a lot of people's livelihoods actually rely on Wall Street and what it does around the world. And so I think that's to her advantage as well. My eighth point for why I think that Clinton will be winning in the state of New York. So this is going to seem a little unusual as a point, but it is a point I think that's valid, is that the United Nations is headquartered in New York State, in the city. And Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State for 4 years during Obama's first term. And part of her role as Secretary of State had to do with going to a lot of countries and talking to a lot of people, as pretty much one of the top diplomats, if not the top diplomat, of the United States. And so part of that journey as Secretary of State is going to the United Nations and chatting with people at the United Nations and giving speeches at the United Nations. So when the United Nations is headquartered in New York State, in the city of New York, go figure, media is going to talk about speeches that Clinton gave at the United Nations. And that has an impact, because it's there and it's a cultural thing. And Sanders just doesn't have that advantage on his side. All right. The ninth reason I think that Clinton will win in the primary in New York State as opposed to Sanders is polling. It's just Sanders has defied expectations in states with open primaries and in states where, like Michigan especially, and in states where there's been a caucus or an opportunity for sort of this unknown quantity, an unknown advantage. I don't think that is going to really stay true for this primary coming up. I think that Hillary Clinton has the lead, and she's had the lead for a long time in the state of New York. I don't think it's going to change. I don't think Sanders is going to win in New York State. He needs to in order to get a delegate lead and become the nominee, but I don't think he will. I don't think he has the advantages that she does. Being a former two-term senator from New York State, living in New York State, and all the other advantages that she has compared to him in his campaign. So that was my ninth point, is that she definitely has that advantage within the polling and the perception of victory. And my 10th reason has to do with something that hasn't been discussed as much in this campaign. But, I mean, it certainly has been discussed. Is that Hillary Clinton is a front runner and a victor in big populous states. Florida and Texas are the metric that I'm using. And that Sanders doesn't scale well in terms of being able to win with a lot of people voting compared to the level of Clinton. So when a contest has a smaller volume of people who are voting, Sanders does pretty well. So New Hampshire, Colorado, Minnesota, Oklahoma, Vermont, Maine, Nebraska, Idaho, Alaska. These states with not as many people, just sheer numbers turning out to vote, Sanders does pretty well. He's won quite a few contests with not a whole lot of people coming out to vote. But in these big contests, Texas, Florida, and Illinois, and now in New York State, where there's a lot of turnout, Sanders says when turnout's big, he wins. Not so much. When turnout was huge in Texas and in Florida, guess what? Clinton won by a huge percent of the vote in Florida, a huge percent of the vote in Texas. I mean, it wasn't even close. It was huge. It was a massive amount of people. Hundreds of thousands of votes difference between Sanders and Clinton when a lot of people are voting. A lot of people. And so, to that end, I think that, frankly, I think Clinton's going to win. I think she will win by a lot of votes. She's got so many advantages in her favor. If she doesn't win in New York, then it's going to change the entire narrative of the campaign. And, considering that all the things I listed as reasons that are to her advantage, if she cannot win in New York for whatever reason, then that changes the entire narrative of the campaign season, and the momentum would be incredible going into April 26th for Sanders if he wins. And so I think that because of that, the Hillary Clinton and the campaign for Hillary Clinton have pretty much pulled out all the stops trying to get support for her victory in that state. I mean, they are employing all of the tools necessary in her wheelhouse or toolbox to, pull off a victory there. And I think it's a big deal. It's a big, big pivotal race. It's sort of the turning point in the election. It's what's going to send if being the nominee is, the end game, I think it is, then winning New York is a big deal. It's got the most delegates other than California between now and the end. So it is one of the biggest contests left. And I just think that the infrastructure in New York State benefits Clinton way more than it does Sanders. And so that's my prediction. My prediction is that Hillary Clinton will win in New York State primary on April 19th. I think it'll be closer than the polls indicate, but I don't think Sanders will pull off, the kind of victory he needs. He needs to win it by, 60 to 70% total of the vote in order to, sort of change the narrative, change the delegate lead before the end of this election and pledge delegates. I do not think that is going to happen. I think that of all the primaries that have happened so far, Clinton has so many advantages in New York State that are unique to her history as an elected official and just as a person, right? Going out and about in the world and talking with people, that I don't think it's going to be a victory for Sanders despite all of his momentum off of his victories. Because there's just so many people who are going to be voting in this primary. So that's my prediction. And I will be very surprised if Clinton loses in the primary on April 19th. Very surprised. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what happens. I'm looking forward to the 19th, to seeing if I'm right or if I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, I'm going to go back to the drawing board and really read through all the numbers and facts as to who voted, and how the breakdown of the vote went for demographics. Because I have a degree in political science, and for a good portion of my life, my adult life anyways, I studied politics, the history of it, how candidates win in elections around the United States, and all my instincts and everything I know about politics are telling me that Hillary Clinton is going to win the New York State primary. I just think that's going to happen. So I will be very surprised if she doesn't. All right, thanks for watching.